Hello, this is Rob, and I'm just going to do a little tour of the garden here. Um, we've put in 21 beds total. So here's kind of an overview. This is our patio bed that's right next to the house, and we'll go through each of these individually. Then we have one cluster of hexagonal beds here. Then we have a second cluster of hexagonal beds here. And then we have a third cluster of hexagonal beds here, and then we have a few extra growing spaces. So we'll go through each one of these individually. These underneath the curtain here are tree collards. The cabbage looper moths got a little out of control, so we had to sequester them, but they're coming back nicely now. This is a black icicle tomato. You can see said tomato right there. We've got a Cherokee tomato right here with some fruit, and then there's a little pepper plant right here we got from Prairie Wind Nursery. I've also got some amaranth coming up there looking really good, and then we've got some sweet potatoes tucked into the back. This was actually the first space that we grew out of. Those collards have been in actually since last summer. So, but they're a perennial. This hexagonal cluster was the first one we built out. We built out 4 to start off with, and then I added the 2 at the periphery there. So this bed right now has corn and beans in it. We did a cover crop of red clover, which you can see the hay that was left over from that. It's kind of serving as a natural mulch. This bed early in the spring was kind of a salad bowl. You can still see some of the Four Seasons Marvel lettuce hidden underneath here, but now it's mostly been taken over by tomatoes, and we have borage, which not only does that feed the pollinators, but those leaves are actually pretty tasty. Got a couple of other things hidden in here too. We've got some arugula hidden in there, and you can still see some nasturtiums right there. We've even got a little bloom on one in the back. And this bed is my mother's bed. It's mostly an herb bed. It does have some tomatoes in it. You can see some of the clover that we planted a little later that's still serving as like a ground cover there. She's got mullein growing right here. And you can also maybe see the yarrow coming up in the back of that bed. This is pretty much a tomato bed at this point. I did plant buckwheat in this to help shade the tomatoes while they were growing up. So we have some beautiful icicle tomatoes on this robust plant. We'll come around the back side. You can see the fruit tomatoes. We also have some little cherry tomatoes. And here's a basil plant. A little bit of wild sorrel coming up there. Got some chives. Interesting thing is that we actually planted 2 tomato plants purposefully. That was the icicle and the Cherokee tomato over there, and everything else were volunteer plants that came up from our compost. So these all came from Canadian Valley last year and got composted. These 2 hexagons at the exterior are both for the tree collards. So we have tree collards in the center. We've got a little wedding veil on this that isn't really protecting it from anything, so we're going to have to fix that. I've got some buckwheat that we're using as kind of a ground cover. We've got some rosemary there, and you can still see here and there some nasturtiums that are coming up. And this is another nasturtium. And then this other bed also has buckwheat. I'm just letting that go to seed right in place with the hope that more buckwheat will just come right up. This tree collard we have a little better covered with the tool. And then there's a little sage plant that's doing really nicely in that same bed. So that's the first cluster of 6. Before we go to the next hexagon cluster, I'd like to show you my hugelkultur bed that I built. We have 2 tree collards. It's a green tree collard, and I believe this is a Merit tree collard. You can see that we've got some pest pressure from the looper moths, but I'm kind of keeping an eye on that. This is pumpkin. These big things that look like grass are actually a crop called Job's Tears. It's a grain, but can also serve as kind of a cover crop. And I've also planted some dill, some nasturtiums. I have clover. I have these naughty amaranth, which are the unwanted cousin of the beautiful amaranth. I have some cucumbers on here. I put some Austrian pea that's gonna just kind of hang out until fall gets here, and then it'll blow up. We used that as a cover crop on one spot earlier in the year, and it did wonderfully. So here's the second cluster of hexagons. This is a mixed use bed. It's got a pumpkin right there in the center of it. We've got cantaloupes on the edge. Oh, look at that, how pretty. Little flower on that. I think that this is rapini. I have so much stuff in these beds, I'm not even sure what some of it is. Little lonely nasturtium there in the center. And we got some beans here on the end, the greasy grit beans. Hoping those get tall enough to actually latch onto this little trellis apparatus that we have built up. I know also I have some radishes in this bed. Bed here behind it that the pumpkin is just making its way through. I've also planted a Japanese variety of buckwheat called Takane. Unlike regular buckwheat, which makes white flowers, this makes these delicate little pink flowers, and the regular white buckwheat has pretty like straight stems on it, but you can see this gets pretty like curved and very robust. Buckwheat is a mineral accumulator, so it pulls minerals out of the soil and brings them up to the surface, makes them bioavailable for other plants. Here we have a little patchouli plant, and that looks like rosemary. Yeah, some rosemary, some other things in there. I'm not sure what all Mom planted in that one. Over here we have some cucumbers. We have mustards, 2 kinds of mustards. I think this is the Chinese bald head mustard, and this is southern giant curling. And then we've got some Zloty radishes and some ruby red beets. This is interesting. This bed was planted with almost the exact same thing as this bed, and man, it's just done really bad. I think that the light distribution is not great, and I didn't get good mulch cover on these, so I've had to recondition these soils a number of times. So we're just going to let that bed do what it does. And one thing I didn't show you, in this bed next door here, you can see the buckwheat right there for sure, but that is amaranth, and that plant will get about 8 to 10 feet tall. There's an elderberry. This is some green or some clover that I put in, and I think I put it in kind of late, so it's been pretty slow to grow. I think it's been just a little too hot. And these beds were both intended to be mostly cucumber beds, but they haven't really filled out that well. These were some of the last ones I put in. Probably the best things that I have going on here are the marigolds, and then some more nasturtiums. We got more of the naughty amaranth. I'm gonna have to go through and weed those out. So all told, three of the 7 beds are doing great, and the rest of them are at least interesting, which is pretty cool. And then in our last hexagon cluster, this is almost all kohlrabi and mustards, and there's some radishes and nasturtiums in there as well. This is Japanese curling or Japanese mustard. Here's some of the kohlrabi. You can see the little bulbs starting to form there. Pretty. And this is our corn and beans. Another bed here, white buckwheat. And here on the back, we did a more traditional Three Sisters planting with corn and beans in a mound. Oh, there's our little fig tree. And let's see, over here we got a couple of wacky things. We got some potatoes right here. And then we're also growing taro, giant elephant ears, tucked around here in the back. And that is a little gooseberry bush. And we have just a couple of more small beds, not really even full beds, just planting areas. There's a looper moth right there. No one likes you. You have no friends. Get off my collards. Oh yeah, this is another volunteer tomato from CVF. Looks like it's going to make some kind of slicing tomato there. And we have these Brussels that have been growing since last fall. Just going to see what happens. And then 2 more heading collards. We have some cannas growing right here. Some have been eating them cannas. And we have some Navajo thornless blueberries hanging in there, putting on some new growth. The compost pile needs to be covered. Friends don't let friends leave their compost uncovered. This is a worm bin that my lovely wife Shayna has built for us. No worms. Oh, that's very heavy. Okay. And then here at the back, this is where we had the compost pile last year. So it's flattened out. And this is our comfrey. And I've left this little patch of lamb's quarter going here as well. It's a perfectly good edible green, so I've weeded it down everywhere else, but thought if we could get one good patch of that. So yeah, anyway, that's what we've got going on in our growing spaces. I have 4 more beds up front, but those are strictly ornamentals. Well, that's not true. I have some amaranth up there. I have an amaranth problem in the sense that I love it. So just one more kind of panoramic view of the growing spaces, and I hope you enjoyed. Bye.